Great, well, welcome everyone. I think we'll probably just get started. My name's Cassandra, and I'm just going to kind of welcome everyone, and then we're going to introduce the kind of four of us and get into things. But for those of you that have just kind of popped in, we're really interested in finding out where you're from. So if you can just, for those of you that have been here for a while, this is probably the fourth or fifth time I've said this, but if you can just tell us the city, town / village and country you're from and put that in the chat, that will just help us in kind of figuring out the different time zones and places we're working with when we look at kind of preparing for workshops. So it's just interesting to know where you're from as well. So as I said, my name's Cassandra, and I'm just going to introduce what's going to happen over this call. I was going to say tonight, but for some of you are in the morning. Yeah, and actually we're just going to share our screen now. Morning, middle of the day. I think there's someone coming in from Australia in the middle of the night as well, so welcome. So just a bit of housekeeping. We're going to just keep everyone muted while we're kind of going through the presentation. There's going to be some points for discussion in which we'll ask for you to raise your hand, and then you can unmute and speak at that point. So you can either use the raise hand function or just physically raise your hand, and we're going to try our best to kind of keep an eye on each of the screens and also do our best to pronounce your names as well. So yeah, if at any point you want to share, which we're hoping all of you will get involved and share your thoughts, that's how we're going to kind of go about it during the Zoom call. Also, we just want to let you know that the session is being recorded. It's not going to be shared out with the four of us in the collective, but we just want to be able to kind of go back and analyze and go over the information that we get from you tonight after the call. So it will be recorded, and we're hoping at the end of the call that we can maybe get a screenshot kind of photo of everyone in the call. We'll let you know before we do that so that you can turn your video off if you don't want to be in the photo, but we just thought it would be a nice picture of the community on our first community call or event as a collective. So just seeing if there's anything else. So basically what we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk about Zero Waste Design Online, who we are, how we got started, introduce the four of us and a bit more about our background. And then we're going to work through some different polls to try and collect information from you that will help us in planning events and workshops and different things. And then we're going to open up for kind of discussion amongst the polling as well. So if you've just joined, if you can just keep yourself on mute, that would be great. And then at the end, we're going to have a Q&A as well. So that if there's any kind of questions you want to ask that we've not covered or you've not had a chance to ask, then you'll be able to do that. So this is me. I'm Cassandra Boulanger. I'm originally from Canada, actually Western Canada, British Columbia. But I live in Glasgow. I'm currently in Boros with Holly at the moment, but I reside in Glasgow, and I run the Stitchery Studio, where I offer sewing courses and workshops and lots of different topics, mainly around how to make clothing, and I try and teach kind of from a sustainable kind of perspective and making practices. So I'm also the co-founder, one of four co-founders of Zero Waste Design Online, a founding member of a new organization called Sustainable Fashion Scotland, which has been started this year. And my background is in fashion and textiles. I graduated January 2019, actually, from the Glasgow School of Art with a Master's of Design in Fashion and Textiles. So in my collection, I was focused on zero waste. So that's me, and I'm going to pass it over to Mylène.
Hello. So yeah, my name is Mylène. I'm coming from France, and I live in Lille, which is in the north of France. I've been practicing zero waste design for 4 years, I think, and mainly on focusing on DIY and providing open source patterns, and try to raise awareness in France because there are not enough content on the topic. So I thought it was a nice idea to bring this topic to French community as well. also, I've been commissioned by Decathlon Group, which is a sportswear group for textile production, and I'm commissioned to lead a minimal waste design project. So my mission is to analyze the benefit of minimal waste design at an industrial scale. So for environmental, but also economical benefits. So yeah, that's it for me.
Hey everyone, my name is Danielle Elsner. I'm coming to you from Portland, Oregon, on the west coast of the United States. I've been practicing zero waste design since around 2010, so nearly 10 years now. I guess it is 10 years since we're in 2020. I have recently graduated from the Royal College of Art in fashion menswear, specializing in zero waste design, of course. I work on creating the tools to create zero waste design, basically condensing all of the information of zero waste patterns into one pattern master and making it really accessible and easy to share and understand. A lot of my focus is around translating zero waste design into the corporate structure as well, and working with brands on special projects and consulting around the idea of integrating zero waste into a full industry scale. So that's me.
Hi everyone, my name's Holly McQuillan. I'm a PhD researcher with a specialisation in zero waste systems design. My background before doing my PhD was in zero waste design. I wrote the book Zero Waste Fashion Design with Timo Rissanen, and have been researching in zero waste for 16 years. Yeah, so that's pretty much me. I'm always really interested in methods, but also increasingly interested in how those methods interface with industry and the system, so the fashion system. So why zero waste design online? So to start with, the first thing that triggered me to want to do something like this was I travelled to Perth for a workshop that lasted a week, and I flew, thousands of kilometres to teach a sustainable course, and it just felt completely weird and wrong and unethical. And the whole flight over, I was kind of torn, I guess, trying to work out what I was doing, why I was doing it, and trying to justify it to myself. And so I wanted to have another way of getting this information out there. The other thing that is really important to all of us is accessibility, because I often get emails from people from far-flung parts of the world who say they would love to learn more about zero waste, but there's no courses nearby to them. They can't go to university to learn it. It's hard for them to access. So and so these things in combination with sometimes it's really hard to find good information and reliable information on zero waste design. So all of those things together means that we kind of thought maybe the way to do it is to collaborate and to go online and to kind of pull all of our knowledge together. And all of the knowledge that's out there in the world on zero waste, and try and put it mostly like in an easily accessible place that's available to people, and to run workshops that are online so that anybody can access it. And Cass kind of approached me about it 2 years ago, I think, and we thought it was a really great idea, and then we decided we'd be stronger with a bigger team, with more minds at work at this. So that's when we asked Danielle and Mylène to join us. So that's kind of why zero waste design online. Yeah, do you guys have anything to add?
Well, I guess, yeah, for me, the kind of idea for something like this came about when I was a student and didn't have, just like Polly was saying, like I didn't have access to education about zero waste design online. I mean, fortunately, I knew Holly and was able to get funding, and she came over to the uni I was doing my master's at, and did a week of workshops, which was great. But having that kind of like wanting to learn more and wanting access, and knowing that there's probably so many other students out there that are in my position, I kind of just thought we have to do this online. We need to do something that enables people to learn. So yeah, that's kind of, I guess, where it came from.
And then coronavirus happened.
Yeah.
that thing, that thing that happened, it's happening. And so definitely for us became a real catalyst to get ourselves organised and really start to implement it. What about Danielle, Mylène, what about you guys?
Yeah, for me, this is super exciting because all of you guys have looked up to your work for so long, and it's so awesome to be part of this group together and making something completely new that hasn't happened before. I think it's awesome that we all come from such different backgrounds and specialties, and we really cover like the whole range of what zero waste design actually is at this current moment and what it can be in the future. So this is one of my favorite projects I have going on right now, and I'm just super excited to continue talking about it and talk to all of you guys. So yeah, this is really awesome.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, it's very exciting and important for me because I've been feeling alone in France on this topic for so long, and just being able to talk about the thing that I'm thinking about, it's so great just to be able to talk about how difficult it can be sometimes, and just to have some discussion about zero waste design. It's so great. Because so there are some people interested in zero waste design more in general, but when it comes to go in details in what it means zero waste design in terms of pattern making, there are a few people very interested. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah. So it's about building community. I'll never forget when I started researching zero waste design, and you couldn't Google it because the phrase zero waste design didn't exist. And I Googled instead making clothes without making waste, and Timo Rissanen's blog came up, and I was so elated that I'd found somebody else who maybe thought a bit like me. Like I felt alone then as well, and so I think the more community and discussion we can have, and being able to move the field forward so that we don't keep on repeating the same kind of, not mistakes, but like having to relearn everything or reinvent the wheel every time. If we can build the knowledge over time by talking with each other and learning from each other, then that's really exciting. So yeah, so that's a big motivation for me. Yeah, so I mean, what do we mean by collective? I guess is that pooling of knowledge and resources. Me and Cass and Danielle and Mylène, we all come from different backgrounds where our ages cover 3 decades, and we definitely have like different kinds of experience with the industry and making patterns and design process and that kind of thing. So the collective for us is about community and people and pooling knowledge together.
Yeah, and I guess, I don't know if you said this already, but just it's about offering resources as well. Like, we want to offer education on this topic. We want to make zero waste design accessible to anyone, anywhere in the world, from world leading experts. And so that's kind of what we're hoping to bring you, is those resources.
And we really want to know what you guys would like. So what kind of things do you feel is missing in education regarding this? What kind of skills specifically are you after? What kind of workshops do you want? Do you want some lectures? That kind of thing. So today, what we're going to do is have a bunch of polls to kind of talk about it and get that information from you. We'll also be sending out like a survey to capture anybody's perspectives who wasn't able to make this particular call, just to gather as much information so that we can work out, you know, what people want in a collective way. Like, what do we want, all of us?
So yeah, now that we have talked about what is the collective, we can talk about the how, because as you can imagine, being in 4 different countries with 4 different law systems and 4 different currencies, it's not easy to build a collaborative project. So what we wanted at first was to not put the whole responsibility of this collective on a single person, on a single member. So we've looked for, you know, solutions to build this project and in a legal way. We also know that our potential community is coming from all over the world, and we can see it in the chat. So yeah, we had to find an easy solution to do this. And a friend of mine suggested us to look at Open Collective. So Holly, if you can go on the next slide. So Open Collective is a platform. So this is a platform you registered from for this event, and basically it has been created to support collective such as our collective. So collective don't have to create a legal entity and open bank account, and so they want to help collective doing what they do best without having the weight of the administrative side. So on this platform we have our own page, which is called Zero Waste Design Online, and everything is transparent. It means that anytime, if you want to look for finances and see how it goes, you can just see all our transaction and stuff. The whole financial part is hosted by a company which is based in France. So it's called Open Collective Paris. So yeah, they are behind this initiative. So this platform enables us to have also to receive donations and to submit some expenses, etc. So anytime if you want to support the project, you're also very welcome to donate and help us growing as well. And so now I think it's all for. Yeah, so now is the time to hear from you guys. We have, as Holly mentioned, we have prepared some polls and some time for discussion, so we can start it, I think.
Great. So the first thing that we're interested in finding out is just a bit about you and kind of what category you fit into. So it's quite possible that you fit into quite a few of these categories. But just to kind of look initially, we've got student, industry, designer, home sewer, researcher, educator, or teacher. And you should be able to click, once we put the poll up, you should be able to click multiple choices, maybe all of them, which you could select that as well. And if with most of the polls, we have a kind of other option. And if you have something that you'd like to communicate about the other option, you can put that in the chat function so that we can then kind of look through afterwards and just see if we've missed anything. So what I'm going to do now is just put up the first poll, and you should be able to see that on your screens now. And if you can start filling that out, we will have a look and see. Got designers for the most part so far, 65, 67. Wow, okay. Interesting. Yeah, so we're at 77% designers, 78. And then next we've actually got researchers, 42%, educators, teachers, 27%. So obviously this is just going to help us to plan workshops and be able to kind of focus on users as well, more so. So I'm just going to give another second if everyone's filled that out, and we'll end in that poll. And great, move on to the next one. So the next thing we want to find out from you is what kind of content you're looking for from Zero Waste Design Online. So we've got online workshops, Q&A live sessions, so this could be through Facebook or Instagram or maybe even Zoom. Got designers kind of series, which we've been doing through Instagram already. About once a week, we're posting about different zero waste designers, but we're just curious to know if that's something that you're interested in seeing or to continue to see. Lectures, sewing patterns, it's another thing that we, well, a few of us have worked on in the past and are hoping to continue doing as well. Sewing tutorials, consultancy, podcasts, articles, and then we've got that other box as well. So if we've missed out anything, it would be great for you to pop that in. So I'm going to just bring up the second poll here, and that should be popping up now. Yeah, if we've not covered something here that you are interested in looking for in content, pop that into the chat. We'll have a look there. Great. Workshops, it's coming out so far at the top. Designers to watch, interesting.
Someone said they want some theory to expand into other fields. Yeah,
Great.
Me too.
That's great. You've been across the way as well, which is good. Yeah. I think we've got workshops at the top, which is great because I think that's kind of where we started.
Yeah.
And then designers to watch at 68%. And then we've got lectures, podcasts, articles kind of around at 62% as well. So yeah, that's great. That'll kind of just, as I said, help us inform how we move forward with Zero Waste Design Online. So I'm just going to end that poll now. And we're just going to move on to our first kind of discussion topic. So we care a lot about being inclusive and accessible, and we want to know how we can make Zero Waste Design Online kind of more inclusive and accessible. We kind of just launched, obviously, but we want to know like what you feel like we're doing well in, what you think needs to be improved, any thoughts you have on the topic of inclusivity, accessibility. So we're going to just try and have a peek and see. You can put your hand up or use the kind of raise hand function. For those 2 seconds, we're going to just open up the, so we can see more of you. Or feel free to just speak up as well if we're not seeing you and you're putting your hand up.
Really, someone's commented plus size. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, one of the things we talked about is potentially starting some of our zero waste patterns kind of in a plus size range. So rather than kind of the average size that's used in the industry, which is usually like a size 8, UK size 8 or 10, actually catering towards kind of plus size to start with.
Yeah, because we know there's a lot of, well, not a lot, but there's a few zero waste patterns out there that are sized for straight sizes already. So so it would be quite a good addition, we think, to start with plus size patterns. as a way of sort of trying to balance things out. Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, you can absolutely just pop, if you've got a suggestion, you can pop in the chat function as well if you don't want to speak up. This
Open source options.
well, what we might do is just
Hi.
Oh yeah, great, we've got someone.
Hi, Anna here.
Hi, Anna.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, great to see you all. Yeah, well, my thing is, I love what you have been sharing, but I think it's gonna be, I love the patterns, but I'm more interested in the process of making these patterns, more like the creative tools to do them, more than just the pattern done. Like that's the thing. That's one of the things I think it will be really useful.
Yeah, yeah. So do you mean like how do you design your own? How do you, rather than taking an existing pattern and you know, cutting it and sewing it, how do you go through the design process yourself so that you have control over?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's absolutely something.
That's what I meant.
We would offer in our workshops. That's yeah, that's really important to us. We also know that a lot of people, for a lot of people, that's really intimidating, and so we'd want to make sure that that was done in as welcoming way as we can, but also kind of at different levels. So you know, we've got a poll question later, which is talking about what level are you at. You know, so are you a complete beginner, or do you have some skills in this, and the kinds of workshops you may want as well.
It's interesting as well, because on Instagram, our posts that have shown process, I think quite a few of them have shown Flow 3D, or just actually like detailing the, you know, start to finish sort of process have been the most popular. So we kind of recognize that as a point of interest for sure. And I mean, I find design process incredibly interesting. It's something that I want to see more of as well. So
Yeah, as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Anybody else?
So there is also how to take a zero waste pattern from concept to production in a way that can be sold.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge topic as well.
Yeah, we me and Danielle and Mylène have direct experience with that, and know the kind of the potential complicating factors that come into that whole process, and we really want to share that with people so that you might be able to avoid some of the difficulties if you're looking to collaborate with industry or start your own company or whatever that may be. So that whole process from origin of idea, the genesis of the idea, right through to the the factory, and then how do you kind of ensure that our whole process flows and works. Yeah, it's a really big topic, but definitely something that we're interested in sharing and discussing and developing resources for.
Yifan just put in the chat, have you thought about the balance between making it zero waste and using much more fabric than needed? And I think that that's something that we address quite a lot. That's not just the pattern being zero waste, but the whole system around it. And, just having a completely zero waste pattern doesn't mean that it's zero waste if it isn't thinking in the larger scale, like if you are using more fabric than the standard pattern. So that's another really important thing to be thinking about that we're going to delve into throughout our workshops and discussions.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's one that that I hear a lot, and it kind of comes down to the difference between yield. So yield is the amount of fabric you use to make a garment versus waste, and there needs to be a balance between those two things. Especially if you're making a version of a garment that already exists, it's quite easy to measure, like it's quite easy to quantify it. But if you're making something new, it's a bit trickier because what are you comparing it to? But definitely is something to think about. And I think that's also where in industry it can be really good to go with minimal waste, because if you're reducing overall yield and overall material consumption, then that's better than what it's currently done. But yeah, it's a really good question. It's definitely something we're interested in talking about further. Anyone else?
Hi, I have one. My name's Britton. Kind of expanding on the theory aspect side of things. I was wondering if you would have sort of workflows and practices to build the skill set needed to sort of identify where you could eliminate waste from your processes and from your projects.
Yeah. Do you mean at a company level or at a designer level?
Well, I'm a designer, so we could start there. But I think expanding to a larger company would, of course, require a whole lot more insight and a lot more eyes on the on the workflow. But I think just starting at an individual level could have a huge impact. Because I mean, I already see what you guys have been doing, and it's really inspiring. And I'm just wondering, how can this be branched out into more than just fashion?
Yeah. It definitely works in a very kind of direct way in any industry that uses sheet material. So, if you use plywood or sheet metal or anything like that, then it works in a quite straightforward, direct way. But when you start working with I know a little bit about furniture making, and like if you're using rotational molding, for instance, when you're producing a chair, then some of those techniques and processes are inherently low waste or zero waste, a little bit like whole garment knitting is in the textile field. And so I guess for a start, it would be about identifying the processes in whatever industry you're in, which of those are particularly wasteful, or maybe you have a particular product that you design that has a really high yield and high waste percentage already. But yeah, we're definitely, I'm really interested in that kind of stuff, and thinking about how do we identify those sort of pressure points or opportunities where we can intervene and get some big wins relatively easily.
In my own work, I've been developing a series of principles and rules to design by and to start thinking around your projects. And it'd be really interesting if the four of us and with our community, we work to create that set of principles that anyone can start at, no matter what level you're at or what industry you're in. So that could be something really interesting that we could work towards.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Well, what we might do is just move on to the next polls. Danielle's going to take over now for that.
Right, so this next one is an easy one. Which platform do you prefer for content sharing? Is it Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, a newsletter that has more specific content for you that we send into your inbox, or other? We want to make sure that we're putting the right things in the right places where it's most easy to interact. Would it be beneficial for us to have a secure Facebook page where only Zero Waste Design Online participants can interact and share ideas? Are you enjoying the content we have on Instagram already? That kind of thing. So any and all answers are welcome, so that we're just giving you the best that we possibly can.
I'm not sure if we said this already as well. Sorry if we did, but if for any reason the poll's not coming up for you, you can put your answer into the chat function as well, and we'll have a look at that and take it into kind of consideration. And we're going to share these insights as well in the kind of coming weeks through Instagram or through the newsletter. So you'll get kind of some of this feedback. And I realized I didn't actually share the results from the last two polls, but I'll do that moving forward so you can see them as well.
How are we looking, Cass?
We're keen on Instagram and newsletter.
Oh, yes. We've been planning a newsletter that hasn't come out yet, but thinking about it. Awesome. All right, we don't have to go on Twitter.
Yeah, no one likes Twitter. Funny.
Oh man.
Right.
Cool. All right. Next up, we've talked somewhat about this already, but what are you actually interested in learning about? And this covers a quite wide scope, but feel free to add anything we missed. History of zero waste design, the oldest origins that we possibly have up into recent case studies. Zero waste home sewing, for the home sewers out there that aren't necessarily in industry, but want to be able to make their own wardrobes for themselves and others. Garment construction, which could be more specifically tailored to zero waste garments because there are differences in how you actually end up constructing sometimes. Design methodology, and that's kind of what I was saying of the rules that go into actually making zero waste designs. Zero waste design with CLO, that's another big one that we get a lot of asks about, which Mylène is an expert in. Zero waste grading, that can be individual or industrial. Systems thinking about the whole world around zero waste pattern making, and that goes into a lot more industry. And then industry processes, which is the actual task of making, constructing, producing, selling. So yeah, any and all, feel free.
So for this one, we're asking you to choose, there's a multiple choice option there, and you can choose your top kind of 3 interests. We've got design methods currently coming out top. So 3D, which is not a surprise either. Garment construction is actually also up there. Zero waste design thinking. Scroll down, and process as well. Great. Just give it another second and see if there's any last open pull up. I think that seems to be everyone. So just gonna end the poll now and share results to everyone.
Awesome.
Cool.
This is amazing. Thank you guys. Also, I have a puppy running around in the back, so I'm sorry if you hear a little bit of a grunting and puppy noises.
Very cute puppy.
All right, and so our next kind of open discussion topic, we want to find out if anyone has actually tried zero waste before in their own work or in industrial settings, but we just want to hear a little bit about what you guys have been doing and experimenting with.
Hi.
Hey.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Maya.
Hi, Maya.
Nice to meet you all, guys. So excited about this project that you started. It's amazing. Just as a way of introduction, I'm a fashion professor instructor at Parsons in New York. And I teach the design class that is called Systems and Society. So a lot of it has to do with systems and systems that are working, systems that are not working. So in my own work, I kind of feel like a bit of an imposter in this crowd because I'm not strictly zero waste. I'm also very interested and had been practicing subtraction cutting. Julian Roberts, and I'm a huge fan, and I love him, and I love the creativity that it brings to the process, and I pimp him out to all of my students, which kind of feeds into zero waste thinking, but not strictly that. I'm also been working for the past 2 years on figuring out a very small brand of zero waste or very low waste plus size clothing made out of remnants and discards and handmade cloths out of India. So I'm mostly practicing what you would call an ancient zero waste. So I'm not, when I'm looking at gorgeous Holly's patterns or Timo's patterns, I'm always like, oh, mine just look like rectangles. So that is kind of what I'm doing, but it kind of presents difficulties in their own right because trying to fit a really large plus size garment onto very narrow goods is a whole different thing. Anyhow, That is the practice, I suppose, and I've been kind of obsessively doing this for a while. I don't have a lot to show, but I have a lot of thoughts and scribbles and notes. And I have taken up 3D around January, then took a break, and now I'm back in it. I'm not amazing, but I'm so grateful for this tool because especially now in the pandemic, it's an incredible platform, an incredible opportunity to try things out without having to cut massive pieces of fabric. So, yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Maya, for sharing
Amazing.
that.
Thank you
love
so
your
much.
work.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I know there's quite a few of you in this audience who've got some zero waste design experience.
Hi, me again.
Hey, Anna.
Well, I will share my story then. Well, I'm from Argentina, but I have been living in Chile and South America for the last 7 years. I used to work for big retail companies in South America, for small brands in Australia, where the focus was absolutely not sustainable. It was all about fast fashion. But I started with zero waste last year, and not in the fashion industry, but in the healthcare industry. So I jumped straight outside the fashion. In the healthcare industry is really complex, unsustainable business that it's all about cost. So it's a pretty big challenge where I'm working right now with isolation gowns for what is all about around the COVID situation. So it's a very challenging moment for this industry. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I had the pleasure of talking to Anna about her project as it was developing. It's fantastic. It's so clever. So thank you.
Thank you.
Please feel free as well, if you're sharing, if you want to put like your Instagram handle or anything into the chat so that we can follow your work, like please do that, and then the other participants can follow you as well.
Anyone else? Don't be shy.
Hi.
Hey.
Oops. Am I?
Yeah.
Am I on? It's so funny. My speakers are blown out. I think it's all this zooming that I'm doing. So I had to put these headphones on. It's giving me an altered sense of reality. It's wonderful to meet you.
Yeah.
Especially you, Holly. I've been a fan for years now, and I have your book. I'm a product design graduate from Parsons. But I've been sewing since I was a little girl. So for me, sewing is just something I do. Like during this time of COVID, this has been keeping me sane. All of my patterns that I've been able to download, especially downloadable patterns. I don't have to go to a store. It's brilliant, and I love being able to adapt the patterns as I see fit before I even print them, which is brilliant. I'm also interested a lot in the material science of a lot of people's zero waste initiatives, whether it be Eileen Fisher's Renew project, where I believe she's felting her scraps and her old fabrics into products that she can sell again. Even, bags and pillows and all sorts of things. So I'm definitely very interested in sharing any knowledge about how to use what little waste we might make, how to use that waste into a product so that it can be have another life down the road, or just putting that out there. But once again, it's wonderful that you guys are doing this. It's wonderful to meet you. Hopefully one day we can all meet again in person, and I can give you all big hugs. I'm in Austin, Texas, and definitely a lot's going on over here, but yeah, cheers to all of you. Stay well, stay safe, and thanks for doing this. So.
Thank you.
Amazing. Well, so nice to meet you.
Yeah, I think that's something that actually I was thinking about the other day, just about maybe sharing on the platform a bit more, as well as like, you know, because my graduate collection had 2 garments that were from Zero Waste Pattern, and I call my collection Zero Waste, but actually a couple of the patterns weren't Zero Waste patterns. I just used the extra pieces in interesting ways in the other garments, or I created artwork, or I actually ended up using some of the leftover scraps to stuff Christmas ornaments I made for my kids and my family, nieces and nephews and things like that. And I'd love to kind of share some of these projects and ideas for using small scraps as well through platforms and stuff. So it's definitely something that I've thought about recently. Yeah, so thanks for sharing.
If I may jump in, I have gone to Eileen Fisher's factory, the Renew factory, and yes, they take back the garments and they recut them into new garments. And they do the felting, but the felting doesn't necessarily go into resale because it becomes a very expensive, almost like an art piece. So those get exhibited, and those become these like one-of-a-kind special things that become symbolic of the brand, but they don't necessarily resell it. But there's a wonderful artist who does a lot of the felting on site.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing.
I'm also thinking about Zero Waste Danielle, who is based in New York, I think, who does an amazing job with scraps. And this kind of project really deserve to be in this community as well, I think.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Like, I mean, a lot of my practice now is in a very unusual space in the context of zero waste. Like, I don't do zero waste pattern cutting so much as zero waste weaving, and so I think broadening what we understand zero waste design to be, making sure that we include you know, all those different things that people do and the companies do and the industry can do to reduce material waste and material use, I think is fantastic. So yeah, I'm all for widening the definition of zero waste. It's not just about pattern cutting, although that, you know, I'll always love pattern cutting. It's my thing, but you know, I think we can be more diverse in that regard.
Yeah, also because when we consider the fact that the whole garment is the waste, of course, when you think about the fabric itself and yeah, reducing the yield, etc. Yeah, it's reducing the waste anyhow.
Cool, great. Well, maybe we'll move on to the next polling question, which I think Holly's going to take over.
Yep, I can see the screen. So I guess we also want to know what skill level you're at. So because there'll be, you know, people ranging from the complete novice who's never ever tried to make a zero waste pattern or just even sew one that exists, or maybe you don't even really know how to sew. You know, you come from a different kind of background, but you're interested in these kinds of methods. And it's through to you know, beginner, someone who's maybe dabbled in it a little bit, someone with a few skills who might be, you know, just a bit beyond the beginner, intermediate, you've had a bit of experience but you feel like you're not totally, you know, haven't nailed it yet, through to the advanced and experts in the audience. So, and it's a tricky one because sometimes you may feel like I'm an expert at conventional pattern cutting maybe, but maybe you feel like you're not an expert at zero waste. So so, you know, just use your own judgment. We don't mind where you put yourself, but we just want to know, you know, like, where do you think you are? Because then we can target the workshops and the content accordingly to make sure that everybody gets something that's useful for them, and then, you know, that it's not too intense or not too beginner. So yeah, great. Got 10 more people to answer. Give it a few more moments. At the moment, we've got kind of beginner and beyond beginner as coming out at 28%.
Interesting. I thought there would be a lot more kind of complete nonsense, but
maybe we're too intimidating. That's not good.
No, no, that wouldn't be good. Great. I think in a moment, if you haven't put the poll in yet, and I'll just end the poll and just share it with you guys. There's the results there. So yeah, we've got kind of a tie between beginner and beyond beginner. And again, that will just kind of help us as we plan our workshops and lectures and everything that we hope to offer. So that's great.
So the next poll is what zero waste design methods are you most interested in learning? So these are like sort of relatively arbitrary divisions, but just to give you an idea. So so are you interested in sort of more geometric square cut type stuff? So most zero waste patterns that you see, especially the ones for beginners, come from this kind of space. Historically, lots of examples of garments that were made using the square cut method. You can still get really complex form, really, really beautiful, elegant designs using this method. So simple doesn't mean boring. It's just more about it's easier to fit a rectangular or geometric form into a rectangular piece of cloth. The next one is from existing garments or pattern blocks. That's actually how I started learning about zero waste. I started with using what I knew, which was conventional garment or pattern blocks, and then or slopers or patterns, and just started playing around with the negative space that those pieces created. And the good thing about that method is that you can kind of determine you want a particular shaped sleeve, for instance, and you pattern cut that sleeve and you design the rest of your piece around that. Or if you want something that looks definitely like a suit, then you probably want to start with a tailor block and then go from there. Another method is using drape, which is like sketching in 3D with the goal of using up all of the fabric. It's really, really fun, very creative, experimental. You can get really interesting shapes that you would never have thought before, and it's really great for beginners. But it can be a bit intimidating if you've never tried it before. And then there's hybrid methods, so that might be a combination of all those. So most of my patterns before I started my PhD were hybrids of those methods. So it was a little bit of geometric, a little bit of using an existing pattern, and a little bit of drape. And so maybe you're interested in kind of learning how to incorporate all those things together. And then there's systems. So Danielle's Pattern Masters systems and the Make Use system, as far as I know, they're the only systems for zero waste that exist. And so maybe it's a matter of learning those systems, but also thinking about how do we develop more, like how we get clearer systems to do this, so that it's just more accessible to people who don't have maybe the skills all the time to kind of build it up from scratch. So we're launching the poll. So let us know what you're most interested in learning.
So far we've got hybrid practices and systems. Also a few from pattern blocks or existing garments. Yeah, at the moment, hybrid practices are coming out on top. Okay. So, I think that's everyone. I think we've had mostly 37 answering the poll for the most part. I think much probably because a few of you aren't able to answer it, but we'll stop it there and we'll just share it with you. So yeah, we've got hybrid practices.
Cool. So a bit of everything. Sounds great. So the next discussion topic would be what's the most difficult part of zero waste in your experience? So those of you who've tried it at any level, what's been the most difficult part in your experience? For me, it's working with industry and their expectations. So I'd love to hear from other people how you would answer that question.
Hi,
Hey.
I'm Milaria. I'm from Spain, and I'm very beginner in this. But with the most is I've been traditional pattern making, and for me now it's very difficult to change completely my mindset towards a new system, and I don't even know how to start sometimes. So I tried to copy some patterns. I did a very short course here in Spain online because of the COVID. But for me, it's very difficult to understand everything behind the design and everything because of my background, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Often it's easier for people who have no prior knowledge, because there's like those rules, they don't need to break them because they don't know what they are. Yeah, I've definitely experienced when I've been teaching people, it can be really, really hard if you have experience in pattern cutting to change your mindset around that. So absolutely, that's really, really common. Hopefully we can help. Anybody else?
Sizing.
Okay.
I'm also on sizing. As I mentioned, I'm trying to figure out how to make it work for plus size, and it has a lot of technical limitations, but it also has sort of a mentality thing attached to it, where there are certain things that are considered to be flattering and unflattering on a larger body that is not a consideration on a smaller body. So unusual shapes or odd shapes are a big no-no, which is something that I'm sort of having to work against, because, oh my God, you're not going to look pretty because you're already a big ugly bitch. So there's like a lot of that in the societal expectations and conversations. So I think it becomes a bit of an interesting thing. But I think also what Holly mentioned, I consider myself lucky in the fact that I have not been practicing a lot of actual sewing. Since college, I've been your regular industry designer. So I would do flats, and I would do sketches, and I would do tech packs, and somebody else would make garments. So by the time that I got into the zero waste space, I honestly have forgotten how to do a proper pattern. So I'm like, awesome. I'm just gonna pretend I don't know how to. So, and I think aesthetically it also goes with what I like. I don't necessarily like properly fitting garments, like traditional looking clothes, familiar looking clothes. So I think that works out well. What I struggle with most, probably, other than, again, kind of going like, oh my God, all my garments look like ancient medieval cloaks, is the finishing, the construction and the finishing. I think that is very difficult because keeping that in mind while you're trying to figure something out that looks like a puzzle, I think for most people, especially beginner or whatever, a little bit above beginner, is a tough part. Because usually, oh, so you have a curved seam, so you're going to cut yourself facing no. So there is a lot of all of that stuff that has to be in the back of your mind while you're trying to figure it out. For me, that's the tough bit.
Yeah, there's some really, really great points. The idea of your first point, the notion of flattering as a thing, I've always found that really problematic. I understand why why it's important to people to to feel conventionally pretty and that kind of thing. But yeah, it is on a personal level. I find that really odd and limiting, because I just love clothes and I love shape and form and drama and that kind of thing. So it's not always flattering, but I think that's okay. The other point around construction is a really good one. I never stopped sewing, and I I've been sewing since I was 8 years old, and so I really enjoy coming up with creative ways of solving construction issues with zero waste garments, because you do sometimes need to do things that maybe a conventional pattern or a conventional construction or a conventional garment you wouldn't need to. And so having a really wide range of kind of understanding of things you could try or different methods you could use depending on what the situation is has been really valuable thing for me. So maybe we can kind of think about sharing those resources and making sure that you know, here are some kind of zero waste construction hacks that are really good to use if you encounter this kind of issue. But yeah, for me, it tends to be my construction. I think about it as I'm pattern cutting, which is hard to do because it's so different to conventional process. But I do think about it as I'm pattern making, but there's always something that comes up. If it's the first time I've done it, like when I first construct it, I'll be like, oh, I didn't think of that, but
Yeah.
you just have to be as creative as you can. And sometimes that's led to some really amazing outcomes. So yeah, a lot of flexibility is required, for sure.
I find myself cheating where it becomes out of 3 pieces of cloth, I'm able to make 2 zero waste garments. So I'm cross borrowing parts and pieces, and hey, it worked out.
Yeah, I don't think that's cheating at all. I think that's a fantastic way of approaching the problem. Absolutely great. And then you can think really creatively about what those fabric pieces are and how they behave with each other. And yeah, no, I love that. So great.
Thank you.
No problem. Anybody else?
Yeah, well, for me, it's more like when designing the pattern to keep the grain in mind. So that's one of the difficulties for me. And the other one is when I'm designing a really functional garment, it's how to make it not so complex in the construction, right? And that's the big 2 difficult parts for me.
Yeah, yeah. Especially when you've got a product like what you are developing, which is you know, very cost sensitive and it's disposable as well. And so, you know, the construction of you know, a piece of personal protective equipment needs to be very, very simple. And that's the same with a number of other garments that are out there, but I think particularly in your case with PPE. And yeah, like I think zero waste garments definitely have the potential to be very complicated in terms of construction. And it's something that I'm super aware of when I design. And it's part of the reason why I'm doing the research I'm doing now, where I weave the construction into the fabric itself, so it's much simpler. But and with Make Use, that was the main goal of that. Like, how do you simplify the making of a form to the point where an 8-year-old can do it? And I think that kind of level of accessibility is really important to me. So making sure that anybody can do this, and you know, the seam construction is insanely complicated and all that kind of thing, unless you want it to be, because it can be a really great design feature as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anybody else?
Well, I think maybe we'll move on to the next. So we've got 2 more polling questions, which Mylène's going to do the next one.
Yeah, sorry. I think it starts raining.
Oh no!
So I'm like, should I go inside? Anyway, so yeah, we are interested in knowing what length of time for the workshop do you prefer? Because yeah, we could absolutely do some 2 hours workshop in the evening, as Holly and Cass already did. We can do also 1-day workshop during weekdays. We could do a weekends workshop, like Saturday plus Sunday. And then we can also think about expanding those FOMA over a few weeks, like for example having 5 evenings over 5 weeks, and those session would be 2 hours. So in total you would have 10 or 12 hours workshop. Or otherwise we can think about 1 day per week over 5 weeks, and then you would have 25 hours by the end. Otherwise, we can also think about organizing a 1-week workshop from Monday to Friday, about 6 or 5 hours a day, and yeah, it would be 25 hours in total. So we could do all of those, but it really depends also on the time zones and your availabilities as well. And so yeah, just share of this.
And different workshops, like the content might suit different approaches slightly better. So yeah, it'll depend, but it'd be really great to know just generally what your preference is. Evenings are good.
Yeah, evenings, over 5 evenings.
So there is a question in the chat. Would the workshop be recorded? We were thinking about maybe providing some pre-recorded content for some, basics, and then organize maybe a live session so we could just answer to the question and discuss with you. So it is also possible. It really depends on if you are interested in this kind of content.
I'm just going to share the results with everyone.
When you say the people who have commented about it being recorded, do you mean recording the live workshop and then sharing it afterwards, or do you mean having it pre-recorded and then kind of following along at your own pace?
Yeah, so recording live workshops that could be viewed later. This is something that definitely will kind of take into consideration, just because there might be kind of participatory elements that you might want to try again after the workshop. And so, yeah, it's something we'll definitely take into consideration. Cool. Yeah, and time, yeah, because again, like if you're in a different time zone and you might want to attend a class, but it's 2 in the morning, being able to access it at a later time. And obviously we want to make this as accessible as possible. So I'm definitely interested in doing that.
Yeah, and we're going to try and cater to as wide a range of time zones as we can. We cover a few time zones just because Danielle's in Portland, Oregon, and the rest of us are kind of, in Europe. So there is large chunks between that where maybe it's a bit trickier. So yeah, having, I think, the ability to record and share later would be a great thing. And then, so how would you prefer to pay for a workshop? So this is a really kind of straightforward question, I guess. So just like one payment, whatever that may be, and or a subscription-based thing, almost like you pay like a monthly fee and you get sort of a particular service from us from that, whether that's sort of like a workshop at a regular basis, or you can kind of come and show us and talk with us about the things you've been working on. We help you problem solve things, that kind of thing. Or a payment plan maybe, so like the one-off payment, but you just divide it across a few months so that it's more accessible and affordable. maybe if you have any other suggestions, pop it in the chat box.
So at the moment we've got kind of one payment. Obviously it's going to be slightly different if a workshop is, you know, we charge £10 for our really early workshops, just to kind of trial things. But, you know, if we're doing a kind of 5-day workshop, it might be upward of £250, euros, or, you know, and for some people that might not be affordable in one go. And again, we want to make it as kind of financially accessible as possible. And so that's where maybe, you know, an option of a payment plan for a more expensive class could come in. So I'll just share those results. Yeah, most of you said one payment, which is just, yeah, helpful for us to know.
Yeah. And then I'd love to know if any of you have ever tried to apply zero waste in the industry. Like I said, me, Danielle and Mylène have, and I know that there are other examples out there. They're in my PhD, so, but I'm wondering if any of you have like maybe own your own company, your own brand, or have worked in a company where you've tried to implement some of this stuff, and, you know, any insights?
I'll bite. I've worked for an arts nonprofit for almost the past 5 years, and we have a shoestring budget, so we're usually always trying to find ways we can reuse a lot of the materials we already have on hand. So a lot of the things in the space are built out of old printing boards that have beautiful screen printed graphics on them. And we've just cut them up and repurposed them for other things in the space. Other times we'll have, you know, really kind of roughshod made workbenches or things like that, just made out of other things that we no longer had use for. So I'm trying to kind of get a sense of the zero waste workflow as it pertains to like thicker materials and things like that. And you mentioned like furniture design and plywood, like that's definitely something I see a lot of, like living hinge type things that are, you know, designed to fold together with minimal like taking away of the material, I guess you could say.
Yeah. I've got a good friend of mine's a furniture designer, and she is exploring the use of textile waste to create like extrude, it's almost like extrude something stiff enough that you can sit on. And it's super interesting. So it's lots and lots of different techniques and methods in furniture design, product design, that so exciting. It's so interesting. Maybe I could get her to come and give a talk about what she's doing for one of our lectures or something. Yeah, and for me in industry, I've worked with 3 really large international brands to attempt to put zero waste through their entire supply chain, and sometimes the kind of perspective they come to me with is that I just need to work with their marker makers to solve the waste that the design creates, and not attempt to change any other part of the whole process. And so the application in industry, the first thing that comes up is needing to address the misconceptions about where the waste is made. You know, it's not made by a marker maker; it's made by the design. And so it's been really interesting for me. Has anybody else had any experience they want to talk about?
Hi, we're Boris from Costa Rica. I'm Oscar, the creative director, and this is Irene, the brand manager. Hi, I came across your work, Holly, when I was researching my thesis in Berlin. That's where I went to fashion school. And we've started our zero waste line. So about 80% of our our inventory or offering is zero waste. So I think regarding your question, we're selling. We've been selling for 5 years, and we've been pushing the zero waste research further, and we would like to become 100% zero waste. It's really difficult. So yeah, we're an example maybe for the industry in context. Although our line is small, we've done it. So
yeah, fantastic. That's so great. The 20% of your line that isn't zero waste, why is that? What about those pieces makes it hard?
Tailoring maybe sometimes, because we do have a lot of specific customers that come and have things tailor-made for them. So then when that happens, then there's a little waste happening there. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So maybe then it's just about thinking about other ways of using what you cut off. You know, that isn't about pattern cutting, but about some other kind of process that
reprocessing or
yeah, great, fantastic. That's so great to hear.
Thank you.
Oh, work. Anybody else?
Hi.
Hey.
Sorry, that's my dog. I work for an Instagram influencer. I make quilt coats. I made the pattern for it, but I weighed the fabric and it's like over 40% waste of what she sends me gets wasted, which is like horrific. So I was making like little pouches out of the waste, but she deemed it not worth the time. So I just have piles and piles of fabric that I've quilted together, and then I cut out the shape of the garment and then I construct it. But it's horrible. I hate it. So I'm trying to like figure out how I can reconfigure the pattern, or like just rethink this quilt coat, or just like figure out how I don't have 43% waste sitting around in my studio after I make the garment.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's not unusual for a garment to waste that much. I mean, the industry average is about 15%, but I've seen other estimates that it's closer to 35. So, you know, it's very hard to get that actual data. But in terms of what that example really beautifully shows is like you are basically operating as like an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. You know, you're at the receiving end of this design process that you're like, oh my God, I have to deal with this stuff now. And I guess, you know, the whole planet's like that at the moment, and the way that we are behaving is you know, your experience, extrapolate that out to, you know, a global scale, and you see governments.
It's like, oh my God, what do I do with this stuff? And then it's like extra time to process it, to sort it, to like take the strips, put those in the eventual rag rug pile, cut out the bigger pieces into whatever, cut out the smaller pieces, save all the little scraps to stuff them into little pillows and stuff. But like, it's not making the garment it's like 30 feet of fabric per garment, which is unbelievable.
Insane. Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. So I mean, we know the problem. The place where the waste is created is in the design stage, and there's a lot of there's a lot of ego attached in the context of design, and the sense of doing things a particular way, and certain people having particular kinds of control over the process. So, I mean,
and then like deeming the scraps not worth doing anything with. I'm like, I will not throw these out. This is like beautiful Robert Kaufman fabric. Like, it came from somewhere. Somebody grew it and processed it and made it into this fabric. So I can't just be like, into the trash you go.
Yeah, the whole mindset around how we value materials has got to change. Absolutely. Well, hopefully everybody who's here has the right kind of mindset when it comes to that. So, you know, together we can change this situation. Anybody else have anything to add?
We're basically, I think, at this point going to kind of open up to a general Q&A where you can answer or ask any questions about anything to do with zero waste design. So if you have any pressing questions or anything that you kind of thought of that didn't maybe fall into discussion with specific topics, this is your kind of time to ask. It might be pertaining to, you know, specific research that one of us are doing, or our own kind of practice, or something that you're just kind of struggling with in tackling your own kind of zero waste design. So yeah, feel free, ask away.
I'm going to stop the share so I can see all your faces.
I was thinking right now, like with this COVID situation that we are changing to 3D tools to design and manufacture, how you can translate your make use system and decode system into these digital tools.
Yeah. I know, I don't know about Danielle, but for make use, I'm definitely planning on making like video specifically how to use Clo in the context of make use in order to develop designs. That's how I do it. That's how I use it. It was always analog in the workshops that I did, because most people didn't have access to Clo, and I would have to also teach them how to use the software, so it would just kind of hold things up. But yeah, and I'm also really interested in digital tools that facilitate that on another level, like sort of how do you develop software or plugins to things that help that process. So, you know, like we all know that there's marker making software that works out the most efficient layout of the pattern pieces that you have in order to use the least amount of material and waste the least amount of material, because that makes economic sense to do that. But I think we need digital tools that then feed back into design. So it goes into this loop where you know, the marker impact, it makes suggestions about what you could change about the design, and then you can see that across not just one piece but multiple pieces, like in an industry scale marker. Danielle, but you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, for the zero waste pattern master system I'm making, it's so interesting because for a while now I've been working on making them like production ready, so you can actually make the tools to physically give people, but in this context it doesn't really make that much sense. So I'm actually working to make them available digitally to download. And at this point, there's still like where you would download and print it out and be able to use it in real time on Fabric. And I do think that it'd be interesting to develop like in Clo 3D or in some other digital form. But yeah, it's interesting how the current situation has completely pivoted how the system is working. And like, I don't know if any of you have seen the scrubs that I made available, the zero waste scrubs. That was amazing because I got so much real-time feedback on the pattern, as like I didn't have time to vet it like I normally would because it was such an immediate project. And making it available for other people to use right away actually made the pattern way better because so many people were looking at it and there were so many eyes on it. So that might be the way that these tools end up developing, what people think is best, what is the easiest way to understand it. And then that will come along with like, you know, also videos of me showing you how to use it so that it's not just you on your own and, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, we'll see how it develops.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hi, so I'm Lars. I thought I could just introduce myself really quickly. I'm going to be, I just graduated high school. I'm going to be going over to London in about 2 weeks to start my foundation. And so something I've been struggling with recently as I've been like getting more and more into zero waste is the idea of, so we see like the exponential growth of like technology and AI and stuff that's like undeniably going to be a huge part in like a more holistic vision for sustainability. But how can we balance that with things like sort of the more human side of the design process? like the nuance of like our movements and emotions that affect how we cut our patterns. So like, I guess like Julian Roberts' practice, like it's all about the emotion and that stuff versus, so like, how do we not lose that going forward?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think you're absolutely right that AI is going to radically change how we do business, how we know what to produce, how we produce it, and probably to a very large extent how things are designed. A lot of the world's garments are produced, are designed in a process that I would barely call design. You know, it's like on a Illustrator software, it's a flat, and it's about putting this sleeve with this collar. You know, it's like kind of jigsawing something together from a kit of parts. And I think that kind of job will go to AI for sure. I cannot imagine like a job existing where that's what you do manually in the future. We don't need designers to be able to do that. And so if you're you know, teaching at a university where you're training people where that's their job, I think you're doing a disservice to them. You're basically training them for a career they can never have. And I think though what you're saying about the kind of the emotion and the, you know, the kind of the human side of things is absolutely true. Like the kind of experience that you get from a really well-designed garment, from a thing of beauty, from something that expresses who you are, that communicates to others about your sense of self. Designers who can do that in the context of understanding the system as a whole and being able to design within, you know, planetary boundaries and, you know, making sure we don't overshoot any of that stuff anymore. Those kind of skills are the kind of skills that we need. I actually think that the kind of design and designers that we're going to have in the future will either be people who can think from a systems perspective, who are able to be really flexible thinkers and really innovative thinkers and thinking about how, as a designer, how do we fit into all of this, you know, our planet and the resources that we have and the people that are in it and what they really need. Or, so you've got to be one of those, or maybe purely digital. So you do like super creative stuff that's digital that, you know, we can download, and instead of wearing this top that I'm wearing, I can, you know, on Zoom, I can put a filter of whatever the hell I want, you know. So so I think we're either going to have those kinds of designers, digital designers, or systems designers. And part of that system is people and the humanity of designing. So yeah, I think AI is inevitable and it's going to radically change the world.
Yeah, I mean, like thinking about the future, like I think there's going to be a need to embrace it as well, because it's going to be happening regardless. Like, how can we use it for our advantage? Like thinking in that way rather than just like letting like corporations and whatever use it to just keep, because I mean, we could use it to just like keep as another way for like H&M to keep making the same style over and over, so we don't have people doing that.
Yeah.
But like, how could we sort of keep it from being co-opted in a sense?
Yeah, I think we're going to struggle
like,
to prevent it.
Yeah.
I think we'll struggle to prevent it being co-opted, because if it saves money, then it'll you know, it's a good business decision. But I also think there are we can use it in streamlining some of the processes that are more sustainable, to make sure we make better decisions. So the use of AI in the context of linking the actions that the designer makes and how that impacts on material use, the kind of materials that they use, keeping track of you know, like for waste, for instance, when the design gets assessed as a sample, making sure that the person who's assessing that knows that if I change this is the impact in terms of yield or waste, rather than just going, I'm just going to change it, and not knowing not being able to see what's going to happen. So I think tools to support designers to make the right decisions, and also really, I think it's important that we advocate to kind of ensure that we don't lose the magic of design, and, you know, the human hand in it. But you know, do you know the example of, I think it was a fashion competition in China was won by an AI?
Yeah, algorithm couture or something.
Yeah, amazing. I was just like, wow, you know, the future is here.
Yeah.
I think another really cool thing to think about, especially from your perspective as just going into your undergrad now, is that like half of the jobs that will exist when you graduate don't exist yet. And you get to make that. You know, there isn't a job for like designing AI for fashion specifically in this one little niche area. And you can make that your role and make sustainability embedded in the core of it because you care about it already. And I think that that's a really, really exciting position to be in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely really exciting for me. I mean, because recently I've been sort of like pulling, like, sort of like going on like a more surface level of like as many sort of different systems as I can. And that way, like what I'd like to do is sort of figure out how I can like pull things from like stuff and sort of like, I don't know, figure out like how to put that in the context of zero waste.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's awesome.
That could be also a topic of this community, the future of zero waste in the fashion industry, and imagine like making some, I don't know, workshops around that and making this brainstorming of the possible future.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe bring in some experts from that field that we could possibly talk to.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm definitely not the expert.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I mean, futures is like the thing that I'm really interested in. I've always been so interested in proposing other ways of doing things than what we do now. And hopefully when I finish my PhD and I'm going to postdoc, that'll be a big part of what I'm doing, and working with other people who think about how we ensure we make our future the way that works for everybody and for the planet. It is really complicated but incredibly exciting, and yeah, I love my job. It's so much fun. Anybody else?
At the moment when I was doing my thesis back in 2012, I researched, I'll show the link briefly here. From the thesis, it's now outdated. So it's been 8 years since that happened. And I think I had Holly, of course, Timo, and Gianna Gonzalez, and some other people there in the project. Some of the projects don't exist. So I'm been thinking about doing an update on that thesis, and maybe include everyone here. Yeah, there's so many new projects and a lot of things that I've been sort of like putting in this folder for years now, of a lot of efforts of different people making zero waste as a practice visible. I was also teaching a class, a fashion design class, and it was only the last collection. So by the time the students got to me, they had already gone through a pretty normal and the usual fashion curriculum, and zero waste was like a head spin that they would receive from me. Like in the last collection, they weren't really forced to include this process or method or philosophy at all. If they didn't want to, they could, and a lot of them would become interested and engaged that way. So I think that fashion curriculum and education will probably overall change in the next few years, and maybe our work will be even more visible to more people, I would hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the more examples there are, the better it is for everybody. You know, the more diversity in terms of aesthetic and the people practicing, and you know, it just gives so much more sort of scope for students to see this is possible. All these different things are possible in this way. But yeah, it's so funny when you, like when I've been asked to come in and teach at the end of something, you know, when I've been through a standard fashion design education, and then it's like if I ever get kind of tacked in at the end, it's such a sometimes really frustrating experience, and and other times are like, why didn't we do this sooner? Like, how could this be happening now and not earlier?
Why didn't you tell me the first semester, not in my collection, my graduation?
Timing is really vital,
Yeah.
I think, with like when this is introduced, for sure.
Well, at my current university where I'm doing my PhD and where I teach 20% of the time, our first year students, they get it in first class. They have me and I teach them zero waste, so they get it straight up.
Beginning, yeah.
Yeah, we need more of that. I mean, and it kind of makes sense from a chronological perspective in terms of the history of fashion. So in a way, you can kind of argue for curriculums to be built from this perspective, this kind of respect for cloth, respect for materials, and historically, it's how most garments were considered and made. So it can really make sense in the context of a curriculum as well. It's very creative. It's very open. Yeah, so I'm all for putting it in first and second and third.
One of the things we did on Instagram as well is we did a census to try and find out kind of all the zero waste designers and design projects out there as well. And we've actually created a spreadsheet of all the feedback that we got. And we want to share that as well. But if if any of you as well, you can go onto the Instagram post still and add to that if you know of more designers, and then that's something possibly through the website that will have a kind of list that you can access as well.
Yeah, and a lot of them were in the designers to watch series on Instagram. We're sharing that stuff through the platform so that there'll always be a record, and then it gets posted on our stories and then linked through the highlights particular to that. So if you're ever thinking, I want to know, what's happening in zero waste, then over time that whole kind of bank of information will be accruing. But yeah, like I said, if you've got anybody or yourself, you want to add to the census list, that just let us know. Send us an email if you don't want to tag them on Instagram. Yeah, we're really, really excited about seeing all the different people and all the different outcomes that are possible. So great.
And I think it's also important to underline the fact that we are not looking for very perfect, ideas. We are looking also for, processes and how do you think, and maybe the question that you have, and that could be also great to share if you have some thought that you want to share with the community or question, and this could be a great place for you, for us, and everyone. So don't be shy if the pattern is not perfect. You can talk about it.
No such thing as perfect.
I wanted to add, so I'm coming from a background of printmaking and bookmaking, and then I pivoted. I had a work pivot at some point for my personal sustainability, but then COVID happened and I'm still unemployed. And I've been sewing stuff at home for me personally for about 5 years. And then recently during COVID, people have started asking me well, when are you going to start selling your stuff, And I started using some zero waste patterns and just for myself, but I started coming up against this question of how much do I change this to make this mine so it would be okay for me to sell this to people? I don't want to, just be taking other people's designs and creative process and everything. But I also don't come from a background of making patterns or grading or understanding how to size, to scale up, I guess, in this process too, because what I was doing before is probably not going to be able to be my job anymore at all. So it's like, okay, how do I pivot and make this a sustainable thing without, I don't want to take from anyone, I want to be part of like a creative production of things. Yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Well, I think for a start, there are some patterns out there that are open source. So Make Use, all of Make Use is open source, and that is to the point where even industry can use it. And so you're more than welcome to use all of Make Use and do whatever you want with them. You don't have to change them at all if you don't want to. And there are others, so that's always a good place to start. But I mean, obviously, if you're really keen on and being more involved in the creative process yourself and learning how to do these things, then that's what we're here for. So so welcome, and
thank you. I mean, I kind of couldn't believe the timing of all of this, because I was like, it just became a crucial thing that I figure out something different that I'm doing. Like, it's, obviously things aren't getting better for the industry I was in. And so it was just like, thank you guys so much, because this is very good timing and such valuable information. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
If anyone ever has questions or anything, like, feel free to message us through Instagram or email. We'll pop that up at the very end, but we're kind of here to help. And it's great if we can share your questions as well, if like we can bring that into Instagram and share these kind of things. It just kind of helps the community. So please, if you have any questions with your personal projects or thoughts you want to contribute, get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you.
I was going to say, I think it would be useful maybe as a share, if it comes across anybody's world or path, to maybe share the examples of how zero waste is being used in the industry, because I feel like there is a very unfortunate conversation around it, similar to any kind of sustainability effort, is that it's all nice and dandy while you're playing around in college. It's very artsy, it's very creative, you can do it at home, but the fact that it's not scalable. And I think any proof that it is useful and powerful for everybody who's involved in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that it has been used in industry to varying degrees of success. My licentiate, which is like the halfway document for my PhD, and my PhD both have case studies and interviews with people who have successfully implemented it, and the kind of things that they did, like how they dealt with sizing. In every successful case, for example, the sizing approach that they used was planning two mediums side by side, and then a small and a large side by side, and an extra small and an extra large side by side, and that's been, like, from a grading perspective, that's what they've had to do. It requires, bigger than that, requires a complete mind shift around process, and that's why I think there are few and far between really good examples in existing companies. I think there's more opportunity when it's a new company. And they can kind of set it up from the get-go so that this is how they work. When you have like a big behemoth of a company that has a way of working, have their systems and hierarchies and everything, it's significantly more problematic. And I think that's why a lot of the examples you see are like one-off. Like they'll do one thing and then they'll kind of abandon it. But Mylène, her work with Decathlon has been really kind of diving really deep into that kind of stuff. And the four of us have been talking about it a lot. We just need to work out how we can share what we've learned in terms of the industry in a way that isn't breaking any confidentiality agreements.
Yeah, a lot of companies don't really want to share any of that process because it doesn't necessarily point them in the best light. So. Yeah.
Something else comes to mind as you mentioned, Holly, putting together mediums in the large, extra large, or small and large and extra large and extra small. It's been on my mind for a while. I feel like the zero waste practice requires different kind of software. Something that my husband mentioned to me, because at one point in his multi-directional career, he was in engineering, and there is a CAD software that when you move one part or when you enlarge one part, the rest shrink accordingly. And I've been dreaming about this thing for years now. It's just like, can somebody just design this for us? So you have like a piece of cloth, and like when your sleeve gets larger, your body gets smaller, and all that stuff is very organic, because that would be incredible to figure out. I don't know. I think we need to find some techie people to do that.
I completely agree. Like, that's been my dream as well. And I mean, whenever I've worked with industry, I have these moments where I'm sitting there adjusting, you know, like a line on a pattern across a couple of mil, and I'm like, I shouldn't be doing this. Computer software should be doing this. It's like, what am I doing? And yeah, there's a whole heap of things in that whole process which could easily be automated, and that kind of comes into the AI thing we were talking about before, where you know, like marker making software is so one directional at the moment, you know, and it needs to go both ways. So yeah, we need some techie people in this group. We need to like develop those kinds of relationships with people who can develop software that can do that. Yeah, absolutely. And things like being able to like tell, you know, this pattern piece has to stay exactly like that. Like that one can't move, but these other ones, they're a bit flexible because it's like a pocket bag or whatever, so it doesn't really matter. So that kind of thing, would be so good.
I think it comes down, which you said, the marker software is so set in stone, because, and that's kind of a nod to Julian Roberts' I think usual argument, which I very much agree with. It comes back to the hierarchical structure that the fashion is, where there's a certain hierarchy and a certain time sequence that everybody's used to. Designers, they have this beautiful vision that goes on in a sketch, and then all these little minions that are doing the rest of the work, and then like your marker is like one of the last things that come. It's not a part of design process at all. It's actually like the butt of it, and everything had changed, but that hasn't. So yeah.
And this is the most difficult thing about industry. For my example with Decathlon, I've been exploring zero waste design in this sportswear industry, and by the end of the year, I come to the conclusion that it doesn't. It's not related to design anymore. It's more about how you change the organization, and specifically what is the place of marker making in the design process. Because in most of the companies, as you mentioned, marker making is at the very end of the design process. And I have been working with a lot of design team that don't even understand what is what is a marker and what it is used for. They often think that is just for cost breakdown and how you optimize the cost. So designers are not even interested in this kind of thing. But the fact that now I'm with this company, I'm bringing this topic with the sustainable side of it. They are starting to understand that, okay, so marker making is also about sustainability, that we can decrease the amount of fabric, so there is another purpose. And so I think there is a lot to do in organization, not just design thinking.
I think a lot of these conversations are considered not sexy in a design environment, and it has to become that. And I think the more in school, the more there's an emphasis on the fact that it is a creative process, that it is actually something that gives back to you, It's not just like, oh, let me sacrifice my beautiful idea so it can be zero waste, but more of let me learn from this practice and come up with a better idea. That might change, well, rather I see for my students that changes the mindset a lot, and all of a sudden they're coming up with things that are not predictable, that had not been done before. And once they see that, that becomes a real practice, it becomes a real sort of thing where they see the benefit on a creative side, not just on value-based or cost or whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. I think that it comes down to a cultural shift, and one of the things in my PhD, I've got 5 conditions for successful implementation of zero waste, which is in my PhD, and they're all cultural. They've got nothing to do with design on the face of it. It's all about like the mindset that you have when you go into this process, and who's involved, and what's their mindset, what are the organizational structures around that, what's the hierarchy, how can you kind of change that so there is no hierarchy, or you kind of flip it. Yeah, it is a very unsexy kind of conversation for most designers, but it's kind of where it's at. Like that's where the real change happens, and then everything else can hopefully flow a little bit easier after that. And the creativity in terms of design, the sexy stuff, can happen more easily, because without that cultural change at the start, it's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I think
Hi, can you,
go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Can you see me and hear me? I think you can. I'm a student. I just graduated last week for my BA in fashion design. I think that's the program. I don't know exactly. And basically, I found it interesting when you graduate in my school. I'm from Slovenia. You have a presentation, and each of the jury gives you one question. And I was very fascinated that even though I did implement zero waste patterns in my whole collection, meaning every pattern was zero waste, most of the questions were still about sustainability, were more so about choice of materials, because I did use polyester and things like that. And a lot of people, even teachers in, for example, my school, think sustainability can only be in a form of choice of material, meaning that it's natural and that it's ecological or something like that. But a lot of people don't realize that you can be sustainable in other parts of production of clothing. Yeah, that popped into my head while I was listening, so I just had to share it.
Yeah, that's a very, very astute observation. It's I think we've kind of divided the idea of sustainable design or sustainability in general in the fashion industry into something that is solved by a technical solution, like material choice, material development, recycling, any kind of anything technical, and then you have things that are more about an aesthetic, and that aesthetic may not even actually be sustainable. Like it might just look like it's sustainable without it actually being anything sustainable. And for me, what I find really interesting is when you combine those two things. So how do you develop something that's technically sustainable and aesthetically sustainable together? And I think there's a real lack of education around that kind of area. And zero waste fashion design is both inherently, because you're dealing with the technical thing, which is material use, yield, the industry, the very, very much about industry and production, but you're also dealing with what that means for aesthetic and how it looks. Material choice, absolutely very important, but you got to think kind of holistically about the whole picture. And there's polyester is a funny one at the moment because according to many measures, it is one of our most sustainable materials apparently, and yet when you account for its entire life cycle, it kind of isn't so sustainable when you think about microfibers, that kind of thing. So microplastics, so and how it's extracted. So it's very, very complex. It's quite an easy question, I think, for people to ask you when you're presenting your work and they want to have something to say. I like the question that's easy to ask. I mean, I've been a lecturer for a long, long time, and I know that that sometimes people will default to that because they've got nothing else to say. So I don't feel too discouraged. And I think also when you're dealing with something like zero waste, and it is about the technical and the aesthetic. It's so much more complex, and so it's hard for people to understand. How does this fit into this apparently very black and white idea of what is sustainable? Is this a good material? That's a very, people want to know the answer. So zero waste isn't like that. It's more nuanced and holistic, which I love about it, but it can be difficult for some people.
I mean, I'm always kind of fascinated by like local brands from Slovenia. When it was always like, we're very sustainable. Of course, congratulations that they even have like an audience for customers in this economy. But like when you look at their aesthetic and like we're sustainable and we are like green and ecological and we use good materials, it's always in like some kind of pastel tones and kind of beiges and whites, and of course it looks nice, but it's also 50 brands that are in the same tones, because they only kind of go towards sustainability in their material choices. But then they just, I don't know, print something on an organic cotton t-shirt and they say it's more sustainable than something that's made from something more not so natural material. I mean, it's kind of funny to look at it, and it's always like kind of this shade range of colors from white to a sort of dark beige or a gray somewhere in between. It's kind of funny to look at it.
Yeah, for sure. It is definitely like that, and the aesthetics of sustainability people are often high up about, and it does it. Wanting to either avoid it looking sustainable because sustainability is just weird, and then or they want it to look sustainable because it signifies something to to other people, and whether it is or not in reality is sort of by the by. So it is a really kind of fascinating thing to think about and look at, for sure.
I think we'll maybe take one more question and then we'll wrap up because we're just nearing the end of our chat tonight. So if there's one more question from someone,
I guess, so what I was going to say before was, it's actually kind of related to this, is the idea of how the fashion industry seems to separate like textiles and like design. So like, it's like in two totally different boxes. Which is something I'm kind of struggling with because I'm going to have to choose to specialize at some point in either textiles or like fashion. Because something that I would like to sort of explore is like how the manufacturing process of textile is related to like the actual form of the garment. So like how it's sort of integrated with the design. I know, Holly, like with your weaving and stuff, that's a big part of that, but like just sort of, how all the, because I haven't really seen it anywhere else. So like how else that could be approached. Same with like additive manufacturing, like with fully fashioned knitwear and stuff. Like how else can we expand on that?
Yeah, fantastic. I think that's the future personally. Like I think in terms of cut and assemble, in the longer term vision, I think the way that we understand cut and assemble needs to die a very slow death. And I think the way that we manufacture clothes needs to change fundamentally. And yeah, I think those silos that we have about this is textile design and this is fashion or form design, for me are completely useless. I find it so deeply frustrating. I'm actually teaching an MA course at my university called Textile Form, and so it's about designing form in the textile itself and how to do that. And there are definitely methods around doing that I've developed and that other people have developed and used and stuff. But it's, you know, as soon as you broaden that, as soon as you go designing form and textile, things get really complicated. You know, it's you've got a lot to manage. There's a high degree of complexity, which is why the industry has separated everything out. So they've taken this very complex thing and broken it up into little tiny bits so that it's easier to manage. But what that's ended up with is a globally distributed production and design system, which is now impossible to control because it's just so dispersed all over the world. So yeah, I mean, I think also the other really interesting thing about things like additive manufacturing and combining those processes is the ability to like reshore manufacturing and the automation of the production of clothes. It gets really interesting and tricky and exciting in that space. So yeah, I look forward to seeing what you develop with your ideas. Sounds really cool.
It's very impressive that you just graduated high school.
Yeah,
I've got to say.
I'm so inspired.
I know.
When I graduated high school, I was like, ooh, what am I going to do?
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to just mention. Thank you. Because like with you were saying, like it's so complicated because like there's so many aspects to it, but I think like in the future, in like a more sort of hyper localized future, I think that it would be more possible because we have like these smaller communities, so we can have like a textile manufacturer and the designer and the cutter sort of all in like one room, which could make more possibilities.
Absolutely, yeah, totally with you. Let's do it.
Do you guys know about fiber sheds?
Yeah, I love
fiber shed movement.
Yeah,
that's making me think about this, like hyper local in our community.
Yeah,
designing the fabric for the garment it will be. Exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a thing in my PhD. It's a diagram of regenerative agriculture, hyperlocal microfactories, you know, community, you know, and how that works together. It's like, yeah, keeps me excited. Love it.
Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. If you do have any more questions, like we said, feel free to pop us an email or a message on Instagram, but we really appreciate you spending the last 2 hours with us and giving us your insights, and hopefully, you know, they'll help you in some way as well as we share them in the kind of coming weeks. So yeah, if you're interested in finding out what's happening, obviously we've got a newsletter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, everything but Twitter, basically. Yeah. So yeah. So thanks so much for coming tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.